The night the Alpha of Blackmoor almost killed his best warrior was the same night everything fell apart. It was not supposed to happen like this. Nobody planned it. Nobody warned her. And nobody, not even the moon herself, could have stopped what came next. The great hall of Blackmoor was full of wolves that night. Torches burned along the stone walls. The smell of pine and cedarwood hung thick in the cold air. Hundreds of pack members stood shoulder to shoulder, dressed in dark clothes, their eyes shifting between nervous and excited. It was the night of the blood moon gathering, the most sacred night in the werewolf kingdom. The one night every year when every alpha, every beta, every wolf from every corner of the ancient forest lands came together under the red sky. And standing right in the middle of it all, pressed into the shadows behind a thick stone pillar, was a girl named Elara. She was 22 years old. She had dark brown hair that fell past her shoulders in loose waves, sharp green eyes that saw everything, and a face that was careful, always careful. The kind of face that had learned how to look ordinary even when everything inside her was screaming. She was not tall. She was not imposing. She looked like a servant girl. She dressed like 1-2 plain grey dress, worn boots, a braided cord around her wrist that marked her as belonging to the lower rank of the Blackmoor pack. But Elara was not a servant. She was one of the most dangerous wolves in the kingdom, and nobody knew it but her. Tonight she was playing her part beautifully. Head down, eyes soft, steps quiet. She moved through the crowd carrying a wooden tray of cups, offering drinks to warriors twice her size, smiling politely when they waved her away, disappearing into the background the way she had trained herself to do since she was 15 years old. She had spent 7 years perfecting this disguise. 7 years of fadding into the walls, of making herself forgettable, of surviving in a kingdom that would have destroyed her if it ever found out the truth about what she was. Tonight was the most important night of her life. She had a mission. She had to get close enough to the Alpha to plant a small carved stone, a tracking seal made by the elder wolves of the Eastern Ridge beneath the throne chair. That was all. Plant the stone, walk away, and disappear before morning. Simple. Clean. She had done harder things in her sleep. What she had not planned for was him. Alpha Cade of Blackmoor was not what the stories made him sound like. She had heard the stories, of course. Everyone had. They said he was brutal. They said he had torn apart 3 rival alphas with his bare hands during the last territorial war. They said his wolf form was the largest ever seen in the Northern Kingdom, jet black, nearly the size of a small horse, with silver-tipped fur and eyes like molten gold when the rage took over. They said he had never smiled. Not once. Not even as a child. She had expected a monster. What she got was something far more dangerous. He sat on his throne at the far end of the hall, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in all black, with dark hair that fell across his forehead in a way that was almost unfairly beautiful. He was not old. Maybe 28, 29. His jaw was sharp. His eyes were darker than she had expected, not gold yet, not shifted, just a deep, steady brown that swept slowly across the room like he was counting every single person in it. Like he was already deciding who was loyal and who was not. He was not moving. He was not talking. He was simply sitting there, and somehow impossibly the entire room was arranged around him. Like a sun that everything else orbited, Elara told herself not to look at him. She looked anyway, and for one single terrible second his eyes found hers. It was nothing, a glance, half a heartbeat. She dropped her gaze immediately, kept walking, kept her face blank and her heart controlled. Breathe in, breathe out. You are nobody, you are invisible. You are a serving girl with a tray and a cord on your wrist and nothing worth looking at. She felt him look away. She kept moving. The plan was working perfectly. She had almost reached the throne platform, just 3 more steps, and she could slide along the edge of the stone dais, crouch near the back leg of the chair, press the carved seal into the small groove in the wood that her contact had described. 3 steps. 20 seconds. And then she would be gone. That was when she heard his voice. You, low, quiet, but somehow louder than everything else in the room. She stopped. She did not turn around. Her heart was hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat, her fingertips, the backs of her knees. She breathed, steadied, turned around slowly, eyes wide and confused and completely innocent. He was looking at her, not in the way a man looks at a servant. Not with dismissal or mild irritation or the casual authority of someone who owns everything in the room. He was looking at her the way a predator looks at something it has already decided to catch. Steady, patient, inevitable. Come here, he said, and every single person in the great hall of Blackmoor went completely silent. She walked toward him because she had no other choice, because running would have confirmed everything. Because the only way out of this moment was through it, through him, and the only weapon she had left was the face she had spent 7 years building. Soft, ordinary. Safe, she stopped at the bottom of the throne steps and dipped her head in a slow bow. My lord, she said. Her voice was perfectly steady. She was proud of that. He studied her for a long moment. She could feel every eye in the room on her back like 100 small fires. "What is your name?" he asked. "Elara, my lord." "I serve in the lower hall." A pause, something moved behind his eyes, something she could not read. "You are not from this pack," he said. It was not a question. Her stomach dropped. She kept her face perfectly still. "I came with the Greywood servants, my lord. We were brought in to help with the gathering." He said nothing. He just kept looking at her with those quiet, dark eyes, and she had the horrible feeling that every word she said was landing at his feet like a coin, small, clear, and already counted. Then slowly the corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile, something colder than that. "Stay close," he said. "I may need more wine before the night is over." And just like that he looked away. The room breathed again. The noise came back, people moved, someone laughed somewhere near the fire. Elara turned and walked back toward the edge of the crowd, her steps unhurried, her hands steady on the tray. But her mind was screaming. He knew, or he suspected, or he was testing her. She could not tell which was worse. The mission had just become 10 times more dangerous, and somehow she still had to finish it. The hours passed slowly after that. She moved through the crowd like smoke. She refilled cups. She avoided eye contact. She watched him from the corner of her eye whenever she could safely do it, and what she saw disturbed her more than the confrontation had. He was watching her too, not obviously. Not in a way anyone else would notice. But every time she looked, his gaze shifted just a half-second too late. Or she caught the slight angle of his jaw, turned just slightly in her direction even when he was speaking to someone else. He was tracking her. Casually, effortlessly, the way a wolf tracks prey it has not yet decided to chase. She had to move tonight. She had no choice. If she waited, if she came back another time, she would never get this close again. The seal had to be placed before the gathering ended, before the throne chair was moved back to its permanent position in the inner chamber. This was the only window. An hour before midnight, she made her move. The crowd had grown louder. There was music now, low drums and deep strings, and the wolves were drinking freely, the younger ones beginning to shift partially, their eyes flashing gold, laughter turning to growls, turning back to laughter in the way that happened when a pack let itself go under a blood moon. It was the perfect cover. She drifted toward the back of the throne platform. Slowly, naturally, like she was just moving with the crowd. She set her tray down on the edge of the stone dais, crouched beside it as if adjusting the cups, reached into the deep pocket of her dress and closed her fingers around the carved stone seal. 20 seconds, she was almost there, and then she heard it, a sound like thunder but not from the sky, from inside the hall. The drums stopped, the music cut off, the laughter died. And in the silence that followed, one voice spoke, low, shaking, broken, the voice of a young beta wolf who had pushed his way through the crowd to the center of the hall. "My lord," he said, "I have to tell you something about your mate." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Elara straightened slowly, the seal still in her hand, and turned to look because everyone was looking, because nobody in the history of Blackmoor had ever dared say those words out loud in a public gathering. And the look on Alpha Cade's face was not rage yet, but something far worse. It was the look of a man who already knew what was coming and had decided to let it arrive. "Speak," he said. Quiet as a blade, the young wolf opened his mouth. And the night cracked open. If you've made it this far, you already know this story is not going to let you go easily. The young beater's name was Finn. He was 19 years old, lean and pale, with red-rimmed eyes that told you he had not slept in 2 days. He stood in the middle of the great hall with his hands shaking at his sides, and his chin lifted in the way that people lift their chins when they are terrified, but have decided that the terror no longer matters, because what they are carrying is heavier than fear. Every wolf in the room was looking at him, and he was looking at the alpha. "My lord," Finn said again, his voice cracking down the middle like dry wood. "Lady Senna was seen tonight, in the east corridor, before the gathering began." He swallowed hard. She was not alone. Nobody moved. Alpha Cade sat completely still on his throne. His hands rested on the carved arms of the chair. His face had not changed, not one muscle, not one flicker, but something in the room had changed. The air had changed. It had gone tight and thin the way air goes before lightning hits, and every wolf in the hall could feel it in their chest the way wolves always feel danger, not in their minds first, but in their bodies, in their blood. "Who was she with?" Cade said. It was not a question. His voice was so quiet it should not have carried across the hall. It carried perfectly. Finn's jaw tightened. "Marcus, my lord, your head warrior." Silence after that was the loudest thing Elara had ever heard. She had forgotten the seal in her hand. She had forgotten the mission. She had forgotten every careful, calculated thing she had spent the last hour doing, because she was watching Alpha Cade's face go through something that was not quite rage and not quite grief, and was somehow, horrifyingly, both at once. She watched him process it, watched him absorb it, watched his hands tighten on the arms of the throne, slowly, deliberately, the way you tighten your grip on something when you are deciding whether to let it go or break it completely. Then he stood up. And the room took one collective step back. He was taller than she had realized. Standing, he filled the space above the throne platform like a storm front, filling a sky broad and dark and absolutely still in the way that only the most dangerous things are still. His eyes had changed. They were not brown anymore. They were gold. That deep, burning, terrible gold that meant the wolf was rising, that the human part was stepping back to let something older and angrier come forward. "Where?" he said. Finn pointed. "The East Garden, my lord, through the corridor. They may still be there." He moved, no announcement, no command. He simply stepped down from the platform and walked, and the crowd parted for him the way water parts for a stone dropped into it, fast, instinctive, without anyone deciding to do it. People pressed back against the walls. People grabbed each other's arms. People looked at the floor because looking at his face in that moment felt like looking directly at something you were not meant to see. Elara should have used the moment. The throne was right there. The hall was in chaos. Every eye was following the Alpha toward the east corridor. She could have crouched, placed the seal, and walked out of the hall in the confusion, and nobody would have noticed. It was the perfect window, the exact kind of chance she had been trained to take, the kind she had never once let slip in 7 years. She did not move. She followed him instead. She could not have explained it even to herself. Her feet simply moved, fell in with the crowd of wolves streaming toward the corridor behind him, pulled along by something that was not curiosity and not strategy, and was uncomfortably close to something she had no name for yet. She told herself it was tactical. She told herself she needed to understand what was happening in this pack. She told herself a lot of things as she moved through the corridor, her tray gone, her hands empty, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. The East Garden of Blackmoor Hall was beautiful even at night. Stone paths cut between old trees that had grown here for 300 years, their roots lifting through the paving like the backs of sleeping creatures. Moonflowers bloomed along the low walls, white and luminous under the blood moon sky. There was a stone bench near the center, half hidden beneath an old ash tree, and on that bench Lady Senna sat. She was everything Elara was not, tall, golden-haired, dressed in deep red silk that caught the moonlight and held it. She was 24 years old, and she had been the Alpha's chosen mate for 2 years. Not a true mate bond, the kind the moon made, but a formal promise, a political joining that the Council of Elders had arranged when the Northern Territories needed unifying. She was beautiful the way a painting is beautiful, perfect and distant and untouchable. She was not untouchable right now. She was sitting very close to a man who was not her Alpha, and her head was tilted toward him, and her hand was on his arm, and when the crowd spilled into the garden and the torchlight found her, she turned and looked at Cade with wide eyes that were not guilty enough. That was the thing Elara noticed. That was the detail that made her stomach drop for a woman she had never met and had no reason to care about. Senna looked caught, yes. Senna looked startled, but she did not look sorry. And that lack of sorrow was going to cost her more than she knew. Marcus stood up from the bench. He was 26, dark-haired, built like a wall, the kind of man who had spent his whole life being told he was exceptional and had started to believe it in the wrong ways. He had been Cade's head warrior for 3 years. He had fought beside him in the Eastern Border Wars. He had shared meals at the Alpha's table, hunted in the Alpha's forest, been given more trust and more access than almost anyone else in the pack. And he stood up slowly, squaring his shoulders, looking at Cade with an expression that was trying to be defiant and not quite getting there. "It is not what it looks like," he said. Something shifted in Cade's face. For 1 second, just one, Elara saw it, not rage, pain. Clean and sharp and immediately locked away, buried under 6 feet of control before anyone else had time to register it had ever been there. She saw it because she was watching closely. She was always watching closely, then the control came back and with it something colder. "Leave," Cade said to the crowd. 1 word, nobody argued. The garden emptied fast, wolves filing back through the corridor in quiet, urgent clusters, heads down, not looking at each other. Elara moved with them, turned the corner into the corridor and then stopped. Pressed herself flat against the stone wall just beside the garden entrance where the torchlight did not reach, where the shadows were thick and generous, and where she could hear everything. She knew she should go. She knew it completely. She stayed. Cade, Senna's voice, careful, measured. "We were only talking. I know what talking looks like." His voice was very quiet now. Quiet was worse than loud. "Try again." A long pause. "I care for him," Senna said, and then softer with something that sounded almost like relief, like saying it out loud had cost her something but freed her of something heavier. "I have cared for him for a long time." Silence. Elara closed her eyes. "The bonding ceremony is in 6 weeks, Cade said. "I know, you accepted." "I accepted what the council decided," Senna said. Her voice was stronger now. "I accepted what was arranged. I did not accept. I never chose." She stopped. "I never chose you, Cade, and you never chose me. We both know that. We have both always known that. Another silence. This one was different, this one had something hollow in it. It does not matter what was chosen, he said, it matters what was promised. Marcus's voice now, low and angry, the defiance finally finding its legs. You would bind her to a promise she never wanted. You would rather have a mate who does not want you than. He stopped talking. He stopped because Cade had crossed the garden in 3 steps and had Marcus by the throat against the old ash tree. And the sound of it, the sudden crack of impact, the grunt of breath knocked loose, was sharp and awful in the quiet garden. Elara's hand pressed flat against the stone wall. You will not speak to me about what she wants, Cade said, very soft, very close to Marcus's face. You will not speak to me about wanting at all. You are in my pack, you sleep under my roof. You eat my food and carry my banner and stand under my protection, and you stood here in my garden on my blood moon night with my promised mate, and you will tell me about what is wanted. Marcus said nothing. He could not. Hand at his throat was not quite tight enough to stop breathing, just tight enough to stop talking. You will leave Blackmoor before sunrise, Cade said. You will take nothing that was given to you here. You will not come back. If you come back, I will not use my hands. He let go, stepped back. Go, Marcus dropped against the tree. Looked at Senna once, a look full of complicated things, and then walked past Cade through the garden into the corridor, past Elara. He did not see her. His eyes were straight ahead and his jaw was set and his hands were shaking. She watched him pass and then looked back at the garden. Senna was still sitting on the bench. She had not moved. She was looking at her own hands in her lap, and in the torchlight she looked younger than 24. She looked like someone who had made a decision and was already living inside the consequences of it. I'm sorry, she said finally. No, Cade said. You are not. She looked up at him. And to her credit, to some small brave credit, she did not look away. I am sorry for how it happened, she said. I am not sorry for the truth. He looked at her for a long time. Bonding is cancelled, he said. I will speak to the council in the morning. You will be returned to your father's house with full honour. Nobody will speak of tonight. He paused. That is the last courtesy I will give you. Senna closed her eyes, nodded once. And then Cade turned away from her, away from the bench, away from the entire ruined shape of the last 2 years, and walked back toward the garden entrance, toward Elara. She pushed off the wall and moved fast, 3 steps into the corridor, around the corner, melting back into the thinning crowd of wolves who were still drifting, murmuring, not quite believing what they had just witnessed. She put distance between herself and the garden entrance, her heart hammering, her mind already sorting through what she had seen and filing it away with the cold efficiency she had trained herself to use. The Alpha's bonding was broken. His head warrior was banished. His pack had watched both things happen on the most sacred night of the year. Blackmoor was wounded. Blackmoor was exposed. For the people who had sent Elara here, this was extraordinary intelligence, the kind of information that changed the shape of wars. She needed to get the seal placed and get out. Tonight, now, before anything else happened, she turned back toward the great hall and found Alpha Cade standing directly in front of her. He had come around the other way, through the side passage. She had not heard him, she who had been trained to hear everything, and he was standing 3 feet away, looking at her with those gold eyes that had not gone back to brown yet, and his face was completely unreadable. They stared at each other. She saw the exact moment he remembered her, the serving girl from earlier, the one he had told to stay close, the one his instincts had flagged and his courtesy had held in place instead of acting on. She saw the moment he understood she had been in that corridor. She saw the moment he decided what to do about it. You followed me, he said. She opened her mouth to deny it. She was good at denying things. She had been denying things her whole life, but the words did not come. Because he was looking at her with those burning gold eyes, and something had happened to the air between them. Something she had no explanation for and no training to handle, something that felt like a thread pulled tight between her sternum and his, vibrating at a frequency she had never felt before, and the denial dissolved on her tongue before she could speak it. She said nothing. He tilted his head slightly. A very small movement. The kind of movement that meant he had just confirmed something he had only suspected before. What is your real name? He said, not what is your name. What is your real name? The seal in the pocket of her dress felt suddenly like a burning coal. Her cover, 7 years of careful, meticulous, perfectly maintained cover, hung by a single thread in this corridor with the blood moon burning red outside and an Alpha whose bonding had just shattered looking at her like. She was the only clear thing left in his ruined night. She made a decision, not the smart decision. Not the trained decision. Not any decision that 7 years of careful survival would have recommended. Elara, she said. And then so quietly it barely left her lips, that part is real. He looked at her for another long moment, then he said calm, certain, final, the words that would change everything. You are not leaving Blackmoor tonight. She did not move, she did not run. She did not argue. She did not reach into her pocket and close her fingers around the seal and do the desperate, stupid thing that her training was screaming at her to do. She stood in the corridor of Blackmoor Hall under the red light coming through the high stone windows, and she looked at Alpha Cade, and she made the only calculation that mattered in that moment. He did not know what she was carrying. Not yet. He suspected she was not who she said she was. That was dangerous. But suspicion was not knowledge, and knowledge was the only thing that could truly destroy her. As long as the seal stayed in her pocket, as long as she kept her face steady and her story simple and her wolf locked down deep beneath the surface where no one could feel it, she still had a chance. "My lord," she said, and her voice was exactly right, confused, a little frightened, the perfectly calibrated sound of a serving girl who did not understand why she was being detained. "I don't understand. I have done nothing wrong. I know what you were doing," he said. Her heart stopped. "You were listening," he said. Her heart started again. He meant the garden. He thought she had followed out of curiosity, the way a servant might follow a crowd toward drama, the way ordinary people are pulled toward extraordinary moments without meaning to be. He did not mean the seal. He did not mean the mission. He did not mean any of the things that would actually end her. She let out a slow breath through her nose and kept her eyes wide and apologetic. "I'm sorry, my lord, I should not have. I followed the crowd and then I could not make myself leave. It was wrong of me, I am sorry." He studied her. She had been studied before, by people far more suspicious than him, in situations far more dangerous than this. She had been interrogated by border commanders with cold eyes and practiced methods. She had been questioned by elder wolves who could read heartbeats the way humans read pages. She had survived all of it by being exactly what she looked like, plain, soft, forgettable, while the most important parts of her stayed hidden so deep they cast no shadow. But Cade was different. Cade did not look at her the way an interrogator looks at a subject. He looked at her the way someone looks at a door they cannot figure out how to open, not with aggression, but with a patient, quiet attention that was somehow more unsettling than aggression had ever been. Like he was not trying to catch her in something, like he was simply waiting for her to show him what she actually was. "Greywood servants left an hour ago," he said. She blinked, slowly, let the words land. "I was told to stay and help clear the hall," she said. "The head housekeeper asked me." "What is the head housekeeper's name?" "A fraction of a second, less than that." "Marin," she said, because she had done her research, because she always did her research. Because 7 years of survival had taught her that the details other people forgot were the exact details that saved your life. Something moved in his expression. Not satisfaction, more like the acknowledgement of a move well played, the slight shift of someone recalibrating. "You may go in the morning," he said. "Tonight you stay. There is a room in the east wing for visiting servants. You will sleep there." "My lord, I really do need to." "In the morning," he said again. Final, absolute. The way alphas say things when the conversation is over, whether you agree or not. He walked past her down the corridor. She stood very still until his footsteps faded. Then she closed her eyes, pressed her back against the wall, and let herself have exactly 3 seconds of something that was not quite panic, but lived in the same neighborhood. 3 seconds of feeling the full weight of what had just happened, the mission compromised, the night stretched past its safe boundaries, the alpha's eyes on her like something she could not wash off. Then she opened her eyes, straightened her spine and started thinking. The East Wing. She had studied the floor plans of Blackmoor Hall for 2 months before coming here. She knew the East Wing, a long corridor of small rooms used for guests of low rank, near the back of the hall, close to the old kitchens. She also knew that the throne chair would be moved to the inner chamber before morning. She also knew that the inner chamber had 2 entry points, and that after midnight, when the blood moon gathering ended and the warriors went to their posts, there was a window of approximately 12 minutes when the inner chamber was accessible from the servants' passage behind the east wall. She had 1 night, 1 window. And an alpha who was now paying attention to her. She could still do this. She had survived worse. She found the East Wing room easily, small, stone-floored, with a narrow bed and a single candle burning on the ledge above it. She sat on the edge of the bed and took the seal out of her pocket and held it in both hands and looked at it. It was small. Not much bigger than a coin, but heavier, carved from Black River stone, etched with the tracking marks of the Eastern Ridge elders, designed to bond with the wood of the throne chair and vibrate at a frequency only the elder wolves could detect from miles away. Once placed, it could not be removed without shattering, and shattering it would send a signal. A loud one. The people who had sent her here, the Eastern Ridge Council, had been watching Blackmoor for 3 years. They believed Cade was building an alliance with the Southern Wolf Lords, a group of aggressive pack leaders who had been pushing north, absorbing smaller packs, breaking treaty lines. If Cade joined them, the balance of the entire Wolf Kingdom would shift. The Eastern Ridge would lose territory. Possibly everything. The seal was not a weapon. It was a warning system, a way of knowing, of always knowing, where Cade was and what he was planning, so the Eastern Ridge could respond before it was too late. That was what she had been told. She turned the seal over in her hands and thought about the way Cade had looked at Senna in the garden, not with possessiveness, not with the bruised ego of a man whose property had been taken. With pain, real pain. The kind you only feel when you have invested something true in a thing and watched it fail. She thought about his voice when he said you are not sorry, and she heard the grief underneath it, quiet and private, the kind of grief a man carries when he is too proud to put it down in public. She pressed the seal back into her pocket and told herself it did not matter. She was not here to understand him. She was here to do a job. At 2 hours past midnight, when the candle had burned low and the sounds of the hall had quieted to the occasional footstep and the distant creak of the old building settling in the cold, Elara moved. She was good at moving quietly. Better than good. It was the first thing she had ever learned, before fighting, before strategy, before any of the things the Eastern Ridge had taught her. She had learned how to move through the world without disturbing it, how to be present in a space without leaving a mark on the air. She slipped out of the East Wing room, down the servants' passage, through the narrow door behind the east wall, into the inner chamber. The room was dark. The throne chair sat in the center, heavy and carved and ancient, brought back to its permanent place for the night. Moonlight came through the high arched window above it, falling across the carved arms in long pale lines. She crossed the room in seconds, crouched beside the right rear leg of the throne, reached into her pocket. I wondered how long that would take. She spun around. He was standing in the doorway she had come through. How he had known about the servants' passage, how he had gotten there before her, she could not understand and could not afford to think about. He was leaning against the door frame with his arms crossed and his eyes back to brown, and his face wearing an expression she had not seen on him before tonight, not rage, not cold authority, something that looked impossibly like tired amusement. "Whatever is in your hand," he said, "put it on the floor." She did not move. "I will not ask twice," he said. Still in that same quiet voice. The voice that did not need volume because it had never needed volume. Very slowly she opened her hand. The seal sat in her palm, small and dark and damning. He crossed the room, stood in front of her, looked down at her open hand. For a long moment he said nothing. She watched him look at the seal, and she watched the moment he recognized it, not because she expected him to know what it was, but because she saw the exact second his expression changed from cautious to certain, and certainty was always worse. "Eastern Ridge," he said. Her stomach dropped through the floor. He knew the carving, he knew the stone. He knew exactly what it was and exactly what it meant, and she watched that knowledge rearrange his face into something harder and older than anything she had seen from him tonight. "You are one of their scouts," he said. She said nothing. There was nothing to say. The seal was in her hand, the throne was behind her, the game was over, and they both knew it. "Look at me," he said. She looked at him. "Long have you been in my pack?" She held his gaze and said nothing. "Who sent you?" "Nothing." "What else have you taken from this hall?" "Nothing." He looked at her for a long time. She expected anger. She expected the cold fury she had seen in the garden, the controlled violence that had put Marcus against a tree. She watched his face and braced for it, and it did not come. What came instead was worse. "You are afraid," he said, and his voice had changed, dropped its authority, shed its command, become something quieter and more direct. "Not of me. You are not the kind of person who is afraid of the thing in front of them. You are afraid of something behind you." Her jaw tightened. "Eastern Ridge sent you here alone," he said. "It was not a question. They always send the ones they are willing to lose." Something cracked in her chest. A small, terrible crack, the kind that happens when someone says out loud the thing you have known for years and never let yourself fully feel. She locked it down. Locked everything down. Looked at him with flat, steady eyes and said nothing. He reached out and closed her fingers over the seal. His hand around hers was warm and completely still. "Keep it," he said. She stared at him. "I am not going to imprison a woman who was sent here to be thrown away," he said, "and I am not going to help the Eastern Ridge Council feel like they have agents everywhere by reacting to them." He stepped back, took his hand away. "But you are going to tell me the truth, not tonight. Tonight we are both exhausted and the blood moon is almost down, and I have had enough of this evening." He looked at her directly. "In the morning you will come to my study. You will tell me what they told you about this pack, all of it, and in exchange I will give you something they will never give you." "What?" she said. Her voice came out quieter than she intended. He looked at her with those steady brown eyes. "A reason to stay," he said. And then he walked out of the inner chamber and left her standing alone beside his throne with the seal in her closed fist and her heart doing something she had absolutely no protocol for. She stood there for a long time. Outside, the blood moon had begun to fade, that deep bruised red softening at the edges, the sky beginning its slow shift toward the grey that comes before dawn. The great hall was silent. The pack was sleeping. The ancient forest around Blackmoor pressed against the walls the way it always had, the way it had for 300 years, patient and watchful and full of things that had no names yet. Elara opened her hand and looked at the seal. She thought about leaving. She mapped it out in her mind the way she always mapped exits. The servants' passage to the east corridor to the side gate to the forest path that would take her north toward Eastern Ridge territory by morning. She could be gone before he woke. She could report back that the mission had failed, that she had been made, that Blackmoor's security was too tight and a new approach was needed. It was the smart thing to do. She thought about what he had said. The ones they are willing to lose. She thought about the 12 years she had given to the Eastern Ridge Council. 12 years since she was 10 years old and her parents' small border pack had been absorbed and she had been taken in by the council and trained, and shaped and sent out into the world like a tool that looked like a person. 12 years of missions and cover stories and careful, perfect, exhausting invisibility. She thought about the way he had closed her fingers over the seal. Warm, steady. Keep it. She pressed the seal back into her pocket. She went back to the East Wing room. She sat on the edge of the narrow bed and stared at the dead candle for a long time. She did not leave. When morning came grey and cold through the small high window, she was still sitting there, not sleeping, not running, not doing any of the things she was trained to do, just sitting with her hands in her lap, and something shifting very quietly in the deepest part of her, rearranging itself around the shape of a decision she had not made yet but could already feel forming at the edges. A knock at the door, soft, 2 taps. She stood up, smoothed her dress, breathed in, breathed out, opened the door. It was not Cade. It was a young female wolf, maybe 16, with copper-coloured hair and cautious eyes and a tray of food held carefully in both hands. She looked at Elara with the careful blankness of someone who had been told exactly what to do and exactly what not to ask. "Alpha requests your presence in his study," she said. "When you are ready." Elara looked at the tray. Bread, soft cheese, a cup of something warm. She looked at the girl's face, the careful blankness, the steady hands, and felt something move through her that was not strategy and not calculation, and was uncomfortably close to something she had spent 12 years not allowing herself to feel. She was being fed before she was questioned. She was being given warmth and time and courtesy by a man who had every right and every power and every reason to throw her in a cell and send word to the Eastern Ridge that their scout had been caught. She took the tray from the girl's hands. "Tell him I will be there shortly," she said. The girl nodded and turned to go. "Wait," Elara said. The girl turned back. "What is your name?" The girl blinked, like the question surprised her, like she was not used to being asked. "Pip," she said. Elara nodded. "Thank you, Pip." The girl's careful blankness softened, just slightly, just at the corners, and then she was gone down the corridor, her footsteps quiet on the stone. Elara sat back down on the bed with the tray across her knees and ate slowly, and looked at the grey morning light in the window and thought about a man who kept his voice quiet because he had never needed volume, who locked his pain away in public and let it live only in his eyes, who had looked at her last night. A stranger, a spy, a woman sent here to be thrown away, and offered her, of all things, a reason to stay. She finished the bread. She stood up, she went to find his study. And she had no idea, not one, that by the time she walked through that door and sat down across from him and opened her mouth to speak, everything she had spent 12 years building was going to begin to come undone. Not violently, not all at once. The way real things come undone, slowly, quietly, starting at the place you thought was the most secure, starting with the truth. If you are still watching, and I know you are, then you already feel it. Something is building between Elara and Cade that neither of them is ready for, and the Eastern Ridge Council is not done with her yet. Subscribe right now. Hit the bell so you never miss. Drop a comment and tell me, do you think Elara should trust him? Because what happens next depends entirely on that answer. His study was nothing like she expected. She had built a picture of it in her mind on the walk through the corridor, stone walls hung with weapons, maps spread across a war table, the cold, organized space of a man who ruled through fear and kept his rooms the way he kept his face. Impenetrable, deliberate, designed to make you feel small before you even sat down. The room she walked into was warm, not just in temperature, though there was a fire burning low in the hearth on the far wall, casting soft amber light across the floor. Warm in the way that rooms become warm when someone actually lives in them. There were books, not displayed books, not the kind of books that sit on shelves to impress visitors, read books, with cracked spines and turned pages and small slips of paper tucked between the leaves like captured thoughts. There was a desk covered in real work, letters, territorial maps marked with careful handwriting, a cup of something that had gone cold and been forgotten. There was a large window looking out over the forest, and the morning light coming through it was pale and clean and fell across the desk in a way that made the whole room feel like it was exhaling. Cade was standing at the window with his back to her when she came in. He did not turn around immediately. He gave her a moment to see the room, to settle into it, to stop being on guard about the door behind her. She understood what he was doing and she appreciated it and resented it in equal measure, because it was exactly the kind of thing you did when you wanted someone to feel safe, and she was not supposed to feel safe here. She sat down in the chair across from the desk without being asked. He turned around, looked at her. Looked at the chair she had chosen, not the smaller one near the door, the one guests sat in when they wanted to be close to the exit, but the large one directly across from his seat, the one that said "I am not leaving." Something in his expression acknowledged that without commenting on it. He sat down across from her and folded his hands on the desk and looked at her with those quiet brown eyes that had gone back to human overnight. "Tell me your real name," he said. "Not the name, the real one." She held his gaze. "Elara is my real name," she said. "My family name is Voss. My mother was Luna Voss of the Ashpine Border Pack. My father was her bonded mate, a warrior named Cole. They are both dead. I was taken by the Eastern Ridge Council when I was 10 years old after the Ashpine Pack was absorbed." She had never said all of that out loud in sequence before. She had given pieces of it, a name here, a detail there, fragments deployed carefully when a cover story needed texture. But she had never said the whole of it to one person in one breath, and the feeling of it was strange. Like putting down a bag she had been carrying for so long she had forgotten it had weight. He said nothing for a moment. "How old are you?" he said. 22. "You have been doing this since you were 10. I started training at 10. I started working at 15. He was quiet again. Not the silence of someone building a response, the silence of someone actually absorbing what they have been told. She watched him take it in, and she watched his face do something careful and controlled around the edges of it, and she had the sense that he wanted to say something and had decided it was not the right moment. "What did they tell you about me?" he said instead. She took a breath. "They told me you were building an alliance with the Southern Wolf Lords, that you had sent 3 delegations to their territory in the last year. That you were planning to absorb the smaller packs along the border, the Fenwood Pack, the Grey Hollow Pack, the 2 nameless packs in the eastern marshes, and use them as a buffer between Blackmoor and Eastern Ridge territory before the alliance became public." He listened to all of it without moving. "They told me the alliance would give the Southern Lords access to the Northern Forest trade routes, which would cut the Eastern Ridge's primary source of winter income by more than half. They told me that if it went forward, the Eastern Ridge would have no choice but to go to war, and that they did not have the numbers to win that war." She paused. "They told me the seal would give them enough warning to build alliances of their own before you moved." Silence, the fire crackled. Outside the window the forest was bright and cold in the morning light, the old trees standing in their long rows, patient as they had always been. "Of that is true," Cade said. "Except for one thing." She looked at him. "I ended the alliance negotiations 4 months ago," he said. She held very still. "Southern Lords sent their 3rd delegation in the autumn. I met with them for 2 days and then I sent them home." He looked at her directly. "I did not like what they were building. What they called alliance looked to me like absorption by a different name. They were not interested in mutual protection, they were interested in expansion. And the packs they wanted me to help them swallow were small and old, and had done nothing to threaten anyone." A pause. "I am not interested in consuming things that are simply smaller than me." She stared at him. "Eastern Ridge Council does not know this," he said, "because they stopped listening 4 months ago and started sending people like you instead." She felt the ground shift under her, not physically, but in the way it shifts when something you have built your entire understanding of a situation on turns out to be wrong. Not slightly wrong, foundationally wrong. The Eastern Ridge had sent her here to prevent a war that had already been prevented. They had sent her here knowing or not caring enough to find out that the threat they had described to her might no longer exist, the ones they are willing to lose. "They may not know," she said. Her voice came out very carefully. "Or they may not have wanted to know. If the Southern Alliance is dead, then Blackmoor is not the threat they need it to be. And if Blackmoor is not a threat, then the Council has no justification for the military expansion they have been requesting from the Northern Packs for the last 2 years." She said it before she fully decided to say it, the thought arriving in her mouth already formed, the way thoughts do when they have been living in the back of your mind for a long time waiting for the right moment to surface. Cade looked at her for a long moment. "You knew," he said, not accusing, wondering. "I suspected," she said. "I did not let myself know. There is a difference. Are you telling me this?" It was the right question, it was the only question. She had walked into this room as a spy who had been caught, and somewhere between sitting down and opening her mouth she had crossed a line she could not uncross. And now she was sitting across from the man she had been sent to surveil, and she was handing him the inside architecture of the organization that owned her, and she did not have a clean answer for why. She looked at him. Because you fed me before you questioned me, she said. Something moved across his face. Quick and unguarded, there and gone before he could manage it. She caught it because she always caught everything, and what she caught looked like something between surprise and recognition, and a kind of pain that had nothing to do with the conversation and everything to do with something older and heavier that lived behind his eyes. He looked down at his folded hands. You cannot go back to the Eastern Ridge, he said. I know. They will know you were compromised the moment you return without the mission completed. If they suspect you told me anything, I know, she said again, quietly, steadily. I have known since last night. Another silence, longer this time. I can offer you shelter here, he said, under pack protection. Nobody from the Eastern Ridge can touch you inside Blackmoor territory, not without declaring open conflict, which they are not positioned to do. He paused. You would have to stay, indefinitely, until the political situation resolves or until you choose a different path. She looked at him. You are offering protection to the woman who broke into your inner chamber last night. I am offering protection to a woman who was sent here to be discarded, he said. There is a difference. There it was again. That phrase. That quiet, precise phrase that hit the same bruise both times, deeper the second time, because the first time she had been able to tell herself he was guessing. He was not guessing. She looked at the fire. She looked at the books on the shelves with their broken spines and their patient pages. She looked at the window and the forest beyond it and the pale morning sky above the trees. There is something else, she said. He waited. She reached into her pocket, took out the seal, set it on the desk between them. He looked at it. It is not just a tracking seal, she said. I was told it was, but I examined the markings last night and there are 2 sets of elder script on it. The outer ring is tracking. The inner ring is something older. She met his eyes. It is a bond marker. If it had been placed in your throne chair and you had sat in it during a full moon, which you would have done next month at the winter seat ceremony, the vibration would have travelled through the wood into your body and it would have marked you. Not fatally, but permanently. She paused. The Eastern Ridge elders would have been able to feel your emotional state, your fear, your anger, your moments of weakness at any time. From any distance, room was very quiet. They were not trying to know where you were, she said. They were trying to know when you were breakable. She watched the information land. She watched him absorb it with the same stillness he had absorbed everything else that deep. Trained stillness that she recognized now not as coldness but as the opposite of coldness. As the thing a person builds over years of having to feel everything in private. You knew this when you came here, he said. No, I found out last night. They told me it was a standard tracking seal. I only examined it closely when I was alone. You are telling me now. Yes, she looked at him directly. Because if our positions were reversed, if someone had come into my home carrying something designed to make me permanently readable to my enemies, I would want to know. He looked at her for a long time, then he picked up the seal from the desk, held it in his palm the way she had held it last night, examining the outer ring, the inner ring, the 2 sets of script overlaid on each other in the Black River stone. His jaw tightened fractionally. She watched him understand the full depth of it, not just the violation of the attempt but the intimacy of what it would have done, to be known in your fear, to be read in your breaking. For your enemies to feel the exact moment your strength gave out. He closed his hand around it. I will have the elder wolves here examine it, he said. His voice was very controlled. They will confirm what you have told me. They will, she said. And when they do, I want you to know I did not know the full nature of it when I accepted the mission. I would not have, she stopped, started again. I would not have carried something like this against a person who did not deserve it. He looked at her. And if I had deserved it, he said, a careful question, an honest one. She held his gaze and answered honestly. I don't know, she said. I have spent 12 years doing things I told myself were necessary. I'm not sure anymore where necessary ends and wrong begins. That line has moved on me more times than I can count. She paused. That is probably something I should have examined before last night. He said nothing. But something in the set of his shoulders changed, a very small release, the kind of change that means a person has decided something and the tension of the undecided has let go. He set the seal down on the desk. You will take the East Wing room, he said. Properly. Not as a servant, as a ward of the pack under my personal protection. You will be given what you need. You will be introduced to the pack as a refugee from a border dissolution, which is true enough. He looked at her. In return, I would like to know everything the Eastern Ridge Council has told you about the current state of the Northern Packs. Not for war, for understanding. A pause. I have been making decisions about my neighbours based on what they tell me themselves, which is clearly insufficient. She almost smiled. She did not quite let herself. That is a reasonable arrangement, she said. He nodded, stood, moved to the window. Looked out at the forest for a moment with his hands behind his back, and in the morning light with his shoulders slightly less than perfect and his face turned away and the weight of the previous night still visible in the line of his jaw, He looked less like an alpha and more like a man. Tired, honest, carrying more than he made visible. Bonding dissolution will be announced today, he said, not to her specifically. To the morning, to the decision that had already been made. The council will want me to begin the selection process immediately. A pack without an alpha pair is considered unstable. A pause. They are not wrong, but they will want it faster than I am willing to give it. She said nothing. She was not sure what she was supposed to say to that. She was not sure she was supposed to say anything. My wolf has been restless, he said, still to the window, since last night. Another pause, longer this time. Since you. Fire popped. The morning light moved slightly as a cloud crossed the sun. She sat very still. He did not turn around. He did not elaborate. He simply let the sentence stand there between them like something he had set down carefully and was waiting to see if she would pick up or walk away from. She thought about the thread she had felt last night in the corridor. The vibration between her sternum and his that she had no name for. She thought about 12 years of training that had covered tactics and infiltration and survival, and had said absolutely nothing about this. She thought about the seal on the desk, and the broken bonding, and the forest outside the window and the way he had said you are not leaving Blackmoor tonight with the certainty of someone who already knew something she had not figured out yet. She thought about her wolf that she had kept locked and silent and buried for so long it had become background noise, and the way it had gone completely, electrifyingly still the moment he walked toward her in that corridor. Not afraid, not aggressive, still. The way wolves go still when they recognize something. Cade, she said, his name, not his title. She was not sure why. He turned from the window. She looked at him across the warm, book-filled, firelit room. What is your wolf telling you? She said. He looked at her for a long moment. Something moved in his eyes, deep and gold-edged, the color that came when the wolf was close to the surface, not in anger but in recognition. The same thing yours is telling you, he said. And the morning opened around them like a held breath finally released, and the fire burned and the forest stood, and somewhere deep in the ancient bones of Blackmoor Hall, something that had been waiting a very long time began very quietly to wake. But outside the study door, pressed flat against the stone wall of the corridor with her ear turned toward the wood, a figure listened. And when the voices inside went quiet, the figure straightened and walked quickly back down the corridor toward the outer hall. Her footsteps were almost silent. Her face, if you had seen it, would have been completely expressionless, the careful blankness of someone who had just heard exactly what they needed to hear and was already deciding what to do with it. She was a member of the inner pack. A wolf who had served in Blackmoor Hall for 4 years. A wolf who had a second loyalty that Cade did not know about. A wolf who had already sent 3 messages north in the last year, to the Eastern Ridge Council. She reached the outer hall, pulled her cloak around her shoulders. Looked out the narrow window at the cold, bright morning. The Alpha had taken the spy in. The council was going to want to know that. You felt that, didn't you? The warmth of that room, the weight of what those two are becoming, and then the floor just dropped out from under everything. Someone in Blackmoor is already sending word north. The Eastern Ridge knows Elara is still inside. Her name was Dara. She was 26 years old, with dark copper skin and neat black hair she kept pinned close to her head, and she had the kind of face that people trusted immediately, open, warm, reliably kind. She had been in Blackmoor for 4 years. She had worked her way from the outer kitchen to the inner hall, from the inner hall to the Alpha's household staff, from the household staff to a position that gave her access to corridors, schedules, conversations, and the quiet rhythms of a powerful man's daily life. She was very good at her job, both of them. She sent her message north the old way, not by wolf courier, not by written letter, both of which could be intercepted. She used a small clay dish and a stick of black elder root, the Eastern Ridge's oldest communication method, the one that predated writing, the one that worked by burning the root into ash and pressing a thumb mark into the dish before speaking the words aloud into the smoke. The smoke carried the message to the nearest Eastern Ridge relay wolf, who carried it to the next, who carried it to the next, all the way to the council chambers in the high cold territory above the northern tree line. She did this in her room. Quickly, precisely. With the door bolted and the window cracked just enough to let the thin grey smoke out, the message was simple. The scout Elara Voss has been identified and retained by the Alpha. She is cooperating. She has disclosed the seal's true nature. She has disclosed council intelligence. She is being offered pack protection. Request instructions. She pressed the dish flat, scattered the ash, put the elder root back in the small pouch she kept sewn into the lining of her work apron. Then she unbolted the door, smoothed her expression back into warmth and reliability, and went to help serve breakfast in the main hall as if she had done nothing more unusual than wash her face. She was very good at that too. The council's reply came that night. Dara was in the outer kitchen when she felt it, a faint vibration in the relay mark on the inside of her left wrist. The small elder root tattoo that had been pressed there when she was 19 and recruited, that most people assumed was decorative. She pressed her thumb over it under the edge of her sleeve, and felt the words arrive the way relay messages always arrived, not heard, not seen, but felt like a stone dropped into still water, the meaning spreading out in rings from the point of contact. The message from the council was not what she expected. It was not retrieve her. It was not extract the seal. It was not abort the mission and fall back. It was 4 words, remove the problem permanently. Dara stood in the outer kitchen with her thumb over her wrist and the warmth of the cooking fire on her face, and she stayed very still for a long time. She had received difficult instructions before. She had passed information that had hurt people. She had opened doors that should have stayed closed and closed doors that should have stayed open, and she had told herself each time that it was necessary, that the Eastern Ridge's survival was the larger thing, that individual losses were the price of collective protection. But this was different. Remove the problem permanently. Elara Voss was 22 years old. She had been taken at 10. She had given 12 years to the council, and they were rewarding that with a death order delivered in 4 words through a kitchen servant, because she had been caught and chosen honesty over silence. Dara pressed her thumb harder over the mark. She thought about what she was going to do. She took longer than she should have. And then she made a decision that the Eastern Ridge Council was not going to like at all. Elara was in the East Wing room when the knock came. Not the soft 2-tap knock from Pip that morning. This was faster, urgent. 3 sharp raps and then silence and then one more, a specific pattern she did not recognize, but that carried the unmistakable rhythm of someone trying to communicate danger without making noise. She was at the door before the last knock faded. The woman on the other side was someone she had noticed in the hall, copper skin, black hair pinned back, household staff. She had catalogued her the night before the way she catalogued everyone, unremarkable, reliable seeming in a household access. She had filed her away as low risk. She looked at her face now and completely revised that assessment. "You don't know me," the woman said quietly. Her eyes were moving, checking the corridor both ways in the practiced manner of someone accustomed to checking corridors. "My name is Dara. I have been in this pack for 4 years under the same arrangement you came here under. I received a message from the council tonight." Ilara's body went very still. Her wolf came to the surface in an instant, not shifted, not visible, but present, alert, coiled. "What did it say?" she said. Dara looked at her directly. "They want you dead," she said. "The instruction was remove the problem permanently. They will send someone, not me. They know I am close enough to do it, but they will not trust me to follow through once I have warned you, which is correct." A pause. "They will send someone from outside, someone you have never seen, probably within 3 days while you are still new here, before you have pack protection fully established, before the Alpha has formally announced your status." Corridor was quiet. Somewhere in the far wing a door closed softly. The fire in the wall sconce above them moved in a draught. "Why are you telling me this?" Elara said. Dara was quiet for a moment. And she spoke. Her voice had lost its urgency and become something flatter and more honest. "Because I have been doing this for 4 years and I am tired," she said. "And because you are 22 years old and you have been doing it since you were 15 and you chose truth last night when you could have chosen survival, and I am not willing to be the reason that costs you your life." She paused. "And because the order they sent me was 4 words. 4 words for a person who gave them 12 years. And I keep thinking, in 12 more years, when I am compromised, what 4 words will they send about me?" The fire moved again in the draught. Elara looked at her for a long moment. "You need to tell him," she said. "I know. Tonight, now, if there is a council operative coming into Blackmoor territory in the next 3 days, I know," Dara said again. "I came to you first because you deserved to hear it from me before you heard it from him. But yes, we need to go to him now." Elara stepped out of the room and pulled the door shut behind her. They moved quickly through the East Wing corridor, up the back stairs, through the upper passage toward the Alpha's private chambers. Ilara's mind was running fast and clean the way it ran in the moments before things broke open, cataloguing, calculating, sorting through the variables. A council operative. 3 days at most. Someone she had never seen, which meant someone new, which meant someone who had not been in the Northern Territories before, which meant they would need a guide or a cover or both, which meant there was a point of entry she could potentially identify if she moved fast enough. Her wolf was steady beneath her skin. Not frightened. Focused, she knocked on the Alpha's chamber door. Silence. Then movement. Then the door opened. He had clearly been awake. He was dressed, or mostly dressed, dark shirt unlaced at the collar, bare feet on the stone floor, hair that suggested he had been sitting rather than sleeping, probably at the small desk she could see through the open door with papers spread across it, and a candle burned down to its last inch. He looked at Elara. Looked at Dara. His eyes went sharp and immediate in the way that people's eyes go sharp when they are accustomed to being woken with bad news and have learned to arrive at alertness before their body is fully there. "What happened?" he said. "May we come in?" Elara said. He stepped back from the door. They came in. Elara told him everything, quickly, clearly, in the direct, sequenced way she had been trained to report intelligence. Dara's role, the relay mark, the message, the 4 words, the 3-day window. She left nothing out and editorialized nothing, and when she was finished she stopped talking and let the silence be what it was. He stood with his arms crossed and his jaw set, and his eyes on the floor between them in the manner of a man processing information he is also furious about but has decided the fury is not useful yet so it can wait. Then he looked at Dara. 4 years, he said. Dara held his gaze. "Yes, my lord. You are telling me now because the order was wrong," Dara said, simply, flatly, with the tone of someone who has already decided what they believe and is not going to dress it up. "I agreed to pass information. I did not agree to facilitate the killing of a 22-year-old woman who did nothing wrong. There is a line and they crossed it and I am done." He looked at her for a long time. The kind of long time that means a decision is being made, not about whether to be angry that was already settled, but about what shape the response takes. "You will be confined to the East Wing until I can assess the full extent of what was passed," he said. "You will cooperate completely with that assessment. When it is done, the Pack Council will determine your status." He paused. "You will not be harmed, you have my word." Dara nodded. Something in her shoulders released, not relief exactly, but the letting go of something she had been bracing against. He called for a guard from the outer hall, a quiet word, a door closed, and then it was just him and Elara in the candlelit room with the papers on the desk and the burned-down candle, and the night pressing against the window. He turned to her. "They sent the order the same day you arrived," he said. "Yes, probably the moment Dara's message reached them this morning." "Which means they had decided before they sent you that if the mission was compromised, you would not be allowed to come back with information." She met his eyes. "Yes, they did not send you here with a safety plan. No, you knew this, suspected it," she said, the same answer she had given him this morning, the same honest line between knowing and allowing yourself to know. "I have suspected it about several missions. I told myself it was standard operational risk." He looked at her with those steady brown eyes. "It is not standard operational risk," he said. "It is a disposal plan." She said nothing, because there was nothing to say. Because he was right and she had known he was right since last night when he had said it the first time and she had felt the crack in her chest and locked it down and the crack was still there, larger now, the edges of it less clean. He crossed the room. Not toward her, toward the window. He stood with his back to her again the way he had stood in the study that morning, looking out at the dark forest, the black trees against the blacker sky, the faint silver edge of the moon behind the clouds. "I grew up watching my father run this pack," he said. "He was a hard man, not a cruel one. There is a difference, and he knew the difference, and he taught it to me. He used to say that a leader who treats his people as expendable will eventually have no people left. That the first thing a pack gives its alpha is not loyalty, it is trust, and trust is not given because of power. It is given because of what you do with power." A pause. "I have tried to lead this way, I have not always succeeded." She listened to him. The fire in the hearth had burned low, and the room was dim and warm, and she was standing in the private chamber of an alpha who had every reason to distrust her, and he was talking to her about his father and leadership and trust, and she did not know what to do with any of it except stand very still and let it land. "Operative will try to make it look like an accident," she said, "because that was the useful thing, because staying in the practical was safer than staying in the personal. Or like a pack dispute, something that cannot be traced back north, they will want no evidence of council involvement. I know how these things work," he said quietly. "Then you know the most dangerous time is when I am outside the main hall, walking the grounds, in the forest, any moment of exposure. I know. You cannot post guards on me without making it obvious that you are protecting me, which tells them their intelligence about my status here is accurate, which may accelerate their timeline. I know that too." She looked at his back. "Then what do you propose?" He turned from the window, and the look on his face stopped whatever she had been about to say next, stopped it completely, cleanly, the way a hand placed flat on a drum stops the sound, because the expression he was wearing was not strategic. It was not the face of an alpha calculating a defense or a pack leader managing a threat. It was something older and simpler and more frightening than either of those things. It was the face of someone who had already decided. "I propose," he said in the quiet, certain voice that had never needed volume, "that you stop being someone the Eastern Ridge can claim, that you stop being a ward of this pack, a visitor, a refugee, someone passing through under temporary protection." He held her gaze across the dim, warm room. "I propose that you become something they cannot touch." Something that makes any move against you an act of war, not just against Blackmoor, but against the mate bond, which is the one law every pack in the known territories recognizes above their own authority. She stared at him. You cannot be serious, she said. I am always serious, he said, and there was something almost like warmth in it, the ghost of a thing that might have been humor on a different night in a different room. You met me last night, she said. I know, you do not know me. I know more about you than I have known about most people I have called trustworthy, he said. I know you told the truth when lying would have saved you. I know you gave me information that cost you everything you had built. I know that when I closed your hand over that seal, you did not run, and you had every opportunity to run, and the training to have been 3 miles into my forest before I noticed. He paused. And I know what my wolf has been telling me since the moment I saw your face in this hall. She was silent. You feel it, he said, not challenging, certain, the same quiet certainty with which he said everything. You felt it last night, you felt it this morning, you are feeling it right now, and you are trying to decide whether it is real or whether it is the result of an extremely stressful 12 hours, and your judgment cannot be trusted. She swallowed. Is it real? She said. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. He crossed the room. He stopped 3 feet from her, the same distance as last night in the corridor, the same charged, careful space, and he looked at her the way he had looked at her the first time, across the crowded hall with the torchlight between them, except there was no crowd now and no torchlight and no tray in her hands and nowhere to drop her gaze. Let your wolf answer, he said softly. She had kept her wolf locked for so long. 12 years of discipline, of suppression, of reducing the animal part of herself to a tool she used only when survival demanded and locked away again the moment the emergency passed. She had been afraid of it in the way you become afraid of something you have caged for so long you have forgotten what it looks like free. She let it come forward, just slightly. Just enough. It went straight to him like a compass needle finding north, not grasping, not desperate. Simply oriented. As if every direction it had ever pointed had been approximate, and this was the first time it had found the actual thing. She felt his wolf respond. She could not see it and he did not shift, but she felt it, a warmth and a gravity and a recognition that moved through the space between them like a current, and her throat tightened with something she had never been trained to handle because the Eastern Ridge curriculum had covered everything except this. Oh, she said, very quietly. He said nothing. He just watched her face as she understood, and there was something in his expression that she would think about later, in the quiet of the East Wing room, in the dark, something that looked like relief. Like a man who had been told for 2 years that a formal bonding was close enough, that political alliance could stand in for what the moon intended, and who had believed it because he had to, and who was now standing in his own chamber at midnight, looking at a spy from the Eastern Ridge who had broken into his inner sanctum and lied to his face, and then told him the truth and fed her wolf to his wolf and felt them recognize each other, and who looked, for the first time since she had seen him on that throne, like someone who had been given back something he had not known he was missing. I am not saying marry me tonight, he said, and that ghost of warmth was back in his voice, warmer this time, enough to actually be called warmth. I am saying let me protect you the way the bond allows me to protect you. Let the pack know what you are to me. Let the Eastern Ridge look at Blackmoor and understand that anything they send through my gates to reach you passes through me first. She looked at him. And if they send a war instead of an operative, then they send a war, he said simply. And we meet it as what we are, not as an alpha managing a foreign ward, as a bonded pair. A pause. That is a different kind of standing, you know that. She did know that. She knew pack law the way she knew forest paths and floor plans and entry points, thoroughly, practically, with the attention of someone who had needed it to survive. A true mate bond was sacred under every territorial law in the known wolf kingdom. To move against a bonded mate was to move against the moon herself. No pack, no council, no political arrangement outranked it. Not even war made it simple. She looked at the floor for a moment, then at the dying fire, then at him. I do not know how to do this, she said. Any of this, the staying, the being known. She paused. I have been invisible for so long I am not certain I exist properly in the light. He was quiet for a moment. I know what that is like, he said, existing inside a shape that everyone can see and no one can reach. He looked at her with those honest brown eyes. We can learn the light slowly. And the fire burned its last, and the room dimmed, and the ancient forest stood outside the window in the dark, and the moon moved behind its clouds, and somewhere in the deep territory of Blackmoor, a border wolf howled once long and low, the sound carrying across the cold night air like a question that had not found its answer yet, but was getting close, very close. And 3 days to the north, in the high cold chambers of the Eastern Ridge Council, 4 men sat around a stone table in the dark, and the eldest of them, grey-haired, still-eyed, the kind of old that comes from outliving things you should not have outlived, pressed his fingertips together and looked at the relay smoke still curling from the clay dish in the center of the table and said, very quietly, "Send Rook." Others nodded. Nobody asked who Rook was, everyone already knew. They sent Rook. And if you know anything about the way these stories work, if you have been paying attention to every quiet detail, every careful word, every layer this story has been building since that first moment in the hall, then you know that name landing at the end of this story is not a small thing. It is everything. It is where every thread comes home. Elara, Cade, the Bond, the Council, Dara and Rook, all of it collides in the last chapter, and I promise you, the ending will stay with you. Nobody knew Rook's real name. That was the first thing they told you about him, not as a warning, but as a fact, the way you state facts about weather or distance or the depth of a river. Rook had no real name because Rook had no real self. He was the Eastern Ridge Council's oldest and most reliable instrument. Not a scout, not a spy, something older than both. A wolf who had spent so many years wearing other people's faces that his own had simply stopped mattering. He was somewhere between 40 and 50. Nobody was certain. He had a lean, unremarkable body and a face that your eyes slid off of, not ugly, not handsome, not anything that lodged in memory. He could walk into a room and leave it, and 3 minutes later not one person in that room could describe him accurately. He had been doing this since before Elara was born. He had never failed a council order. He crossed into Blackmoor territory on the second night, not through the main gate. Not through any of the 7 border points that Cade's warriors patrolled. He came through the old river crossing at the northeast edge of the territory, a crossing that had not been used in 40 years, that did not appear on any current map, that Rook knew about because he had been in this territory before. Long before. In the time before Cade's father had built the eastern wall, he moved through the forest like water. He had 3 days of intelligence from Dara's messages, Elara's location, her status, her routine, her access points. He did not know yet that Dara had warned her. He did not know that the routine had changed. He did not know that the East Wing room was now empty, that Elara had been moved to the inner hall under the quiet, unannounced arrangement that Cade had made without fanfare or declaration, simply redistributing the household in ways that put her closer to the center of the pack's protection without advertising why. He also did not know about the border wolf, the one that had howled 2 nights ago, long and low, the sound carrying north like a question. That wolf was a young male named Soren, 17 years old, third-year tracker, whose territory ran along the northeast edge of Blackmoor's land. Soren had not howled because he had detected an intruder. He had howled because he had found the river crossing, the northeast one, the old one, the one that did not appear on current maps, and he had found fresh marks there. Boot prints in the soft mud at the water's edge, a disturbed stone, a single broken reed. He had reported it to his patrol captain before midnight. The patrol captain had reported it to the head of border security before dawn. The head of border security had reported it to Cade by breakfast. And Cade, who had spent the last 2 days restructuring his household, managing the formal dissolution of his bonding with Senna, handling the Pack Council's anxious questions about succession and stability, and quietly, carefully beginning the process of understanding what it meant to stand next to someone his wolf had already decided was essential. Cade had listened to the report, asked 2 questions, and then gone to find Elara. He found her in the library. She had discovered it on the first morning, a long, low-ceilinged room off the inner corridor, lined floor to ceiling with books and maps and rolled documents, smelling of old paper and beeswax and the particular dusty warmth of a room that had been loved for a long time. She had gone there because she needed to think, and she thought better with books around her, with the solid accumulated weight of written things pressing in from all sides. She had been there every morning since. He had not told her this was where he went to think too. He found her at the long table near the window with 3 maps spread out in front of her and a 4th rolled, and held open by 2 ink bottles and a small stone she had taken from the windowsill. She was tracing a route with her finger, following the northeast edge of the territory, moving along the old river line. She looked up when he came in, she looked at his face. "He is already inside," she said, not a question. Northeast crossing. 2 nights ago at minimum. He crossed to the table, looked at the maps, looked at the route she had been tracing. "You know him, I know of him, Rook, everyone who works for the council knows of him." She pressed her finger flat against the map. "He will not come directly, he will establish position first, find a high point, understand the layout, identify the pattern of the inner hall guard rotations. He is patient, he will spend a day watching before he moves." She looked up. "Which means we still have time, but not much." He looked at her across the map table. "You have a plan," it was not a question either. "Have the beginning of one," she said, "but it requires something from you that you may not be willing to give." Me, she took a breath. "Rook works by invisibility," she said. He is successful because he operates in spaces where no one is expecting him, gaps, shadows, the places between the watched places. She looked at the map. If we close all the gaps, if we make it so there is no shadow for him to stand in, we take away his only real advantage. He is not a fighter, he is an instrument of precision. In open conflict against a prepared pack, he is ordinary. So we make him visible, make everything visible. We announce the bond formally tonight at the evening gathering, full pack assembly. Every wolf in Blackmoor knows what I am to you. Every visiting wolf, every trader, every outsider who passes through these gates in the next week carries the news north within days. She met his eyes. The moment the bond is public, the council's order becomes an act of war against a mate bond. Rook will know that. He will have standing orders that do not extend to mate bonds. No operative carries that authority, not even Rook. He will have to pull back and wait for new instructions. New instructions require council assembly. Council assembly takes 3 days minimum. He looked at her steadily. You are asking me to make the announcement earlier than planned. I am asking you to make it tonight, she said. Yes, he was quiet for a moment. She looked at him carefully. If you are not ready, I am ready, he said, quiet and certain the way he said everything that mattered. I asked you 2 nights ago, my answer has not changed. A pause. Has yours? She looked at him across the maps and the morning light, and the books pressing in from all sides. She thought about the 10-year-old girl who had been taken from a border pack with nothing but her name. She thought about 12 years of careful invisibility, of being useful and expendable, and never quite real. She thought about the night she had walked into this hall with a stone in her pocket and a lie on her tongue, and she thought about everything that had happened since, the corridor, the study, the warm candlelit room, the moment she let her wolf come forward, and felt it find north for the first time in its life. She thought about Rook moving through the northeast forest like water. She thought about the Eastern Ridge Council in their high cold chambers deciding in 4 words what her life was worth. She looked at Cade. Tonight, she said. Yes, something moved across his face, that same unguarded thing she had caught the first morning, quick and private, and immediately steadied. He nodded once, turned to the door, and then he stopped with his hand on the frame and turned back and looked at her in a way that had nothing to do with strategy or announcements or Rook in the forest. What it is worth, he said quietly. My wolf has been calm for the first time in 3 years. She held his gaze. Mine has been calm for the first time in 12, she said. He left, she turned back to the maps and pressed her finger against the northeast crossing and started planning. The evening gathering was held in the Great Hall. It was smaller than the Blood Moon Assembly, the pack's own wolves, the inner circle, the warriors and their families, the household staff, the elder wolves who sat in the carved seats along the far wall with their pale eyes and their long memories. 200 wolves, perhaps a few more. Enough. More than enough. Cade stood at the front of the hall. He was dressed simply, dark clothes, no ceremonial markings, no formal alpha chain. The simplicity of it was its own kind of statement, the same way his quiet voice was its own kind of authority. He did not need decoration any more than he needed volume. Elara stood beside him. She had been given a deep green dress by a pack member she had not met yet. A small woman named Tess who had appeared at her door an hour before the gathering with the dress folded over her arms and a matter-of-fact expression, and the words the alpha said you would need something appropriate, and had not stayed long enough to be thanked. The dress fit as if it had been made for her. She did not think about that too hard. She stood beside Cade and looked out at 200 faces and felt, for the first time in 12 years, fully visible. It was the most terrifying thing she had ever experienced. It was also something else. Something she did not have a word for yet. Something that lived on the other side of terror, past the place where being seen stopped feeling like danger. Cade spoke. He was brief. He did not make speeches. He said what was true, that Elara Voss was a wolf without a pack, that his wolf had recognized her, that the bond was real and was being honored, that she stood under his protection and the protection of Blackmoor as his mate, and that any challenge to her safety was a challenge to him directly. He said it in the same quiet, certain voice he used for everything that mattered. The hall was very still. Then the eldest of the elder wolves, a woman named Gran Moth, who was 97 years old and had seen 7 alpha generations, and had the kind of eyes that looked at you and saw not who you were presenting but who you actually were, stood up from her carved seat and said, in a voice like gravel and old smoke, 2 words. Moon. And 200 wolves echoed it. The sound of it moved through the hall like a wave, deep and resonant, the acknowledgement that the pack gave when the moon's work was being honored, when a true bond was being recognized. It was not applause, it was older than applause. It was the sound of a living thing recognizing something real. Elara stood very still beside Cade and felt it move through her and did not trust herself to speak. Cade's hand found hers at his side, not performed, not displayed. Just his hand closing around hers, warm and steady and unhurried, the way he did everything. She held on in the forest, Rook stopped, he was in position. He had been in position since late afternoon, settled high in an old oak at the edge of the inner hall's sight line, still as bark, patient as he had always been patient. He had watched the hall fill. He had watched the gathering begin. He had a clear view of the upper windows, and he was waiting for the movement patterns to establish themselves, for the guards to rotate, for the gap he needed to open. Then he heard it, 200 voices inside the stone walls, low and resonant and unmistakable. The moon. He stayed in the oak for a long time after the sound faded. He had been doing this for 30 years. He had walked into situations far more complicated than this one, and walked back out with the order completed and his hands clean. He was very good at what he did, and he had never hesitated before. But he knew pack law as well as anyone alive. He knew what that sound meant. He knew what it changed. He pressed his back against the oak and looked up through the bare branches at the night sky, the moon half full above him, pale and cold and indifferent, and he ran the calculations that the council had not made when they sent him here. The calculations they should have made. A public bond announcement, full pack witness, elder confirmation. The mate bond recognized and declared. Any move against her now was a move against him, against the bond, against the law that every pack in the known territories recognized above their own. The council did not have the political standing to ask him to cross that line, not without assembly, not without formal declaration of war against Blackmoor, not tonight. He climbed down from the oak. He moved back through the forest toward the northeast crossing. He went home. The message that arrived at the Eastern Ridge Council chambers 3 days later was brief. The operative declined to complete the order. The mate bond has been publicly declared and witnessed. Completion would constitute an act of war under territorial law. Request council assembly to determine new course of action. The eldest council member, grey-haired, still-eyed, the kind of old that comes from outliving things you should not have outlived, read the message twice. Pressed his fingertips together. Looked at the 3 men across the table from him. She outmaneuvered us, said the one on the left. She had help, said the one on the right. It does not matter who helped, the eldest said quietly. What matters is where we are now. He set the message down. We sent a scout to prevent an alliance. The alliance we feared is dead. The scout we sent is now bonded to the alpha we feared. Blackmoor's position is stronger than it was before we acted. Our position is weaker. He paused. Explain to me how this is not a failure of intelligence. Nobody answered. We will call assembly, the eldest said. We will reconsider our position on Blackmoor, and we will do it correctly this time with accurate information, gathered through proper channels by wolves who are not disposable. He looked at each face around the table. We have made a habit of sending people we do not value and being surprised when they choose their own value instead. He stood. This conversation is over, he said, and it was. The night after the gathering, Elara stood on the moonlit grounds of Blackmoor Hall. The inner courtyard was empty at this hour, the pack sleeping, the guards at the outer walls, the hall behind her dark except for the long amber line of light under the great hall door. The moon was half full above the tree line. The forest stood in its long rows, patient and ancient, full of things that had no names but had been here forever. She heard him before she saw him, not his footsteps, she never heard his footsteps. She felt him. That compass needle pull, that current that moved through the air between them, that her wolf tracked the way it tracked moon position and wind direction, and all the other things that were simply true. He came and stood beside her. They were quiet together for a while, the particular comfortable quiet that 2 people share when they have passed through something difficult together and come out on the other side and do not need to fill the space with words. The council will call assembly, she said finally. I know. They will not accept this easily. The Northern Territories, the political structure, it will take time before they stop seeing Blackmoor as a threat. I know that too, he said. I have been managing neighbours who misunderstand me for 3 years. I am not afraid of the work. She looked out at the forest. I have nothing, she said. No pack, no territory, no family, no rank. I am bringing you a set of skills that are mostly useful for deception and a list of enemies that stretches the length of the Northern Territories. A pause. That is not a typical thing to offer an alpha. He was quiet for a moment. You are bringing me someone my wolf has been looking for without knowing what it was looking for, he said, and you are bringing me the truth, which is considerably more valuable than you seem to think. He looked at her. I am not a man who needs more territory. I am a man who has been surrounded by people who tell him what they think he wants to hear. A pause. I have been very lonely in this hall. She turned and looked at him. In the moonlight his face was open in a way it never was in the daylight, the careful control softer at the edges, the locked grief unlocked slightly, the patient stillness of him present but warmer. Like a fire that had been maintained at minimum for a long time and had just been given more wood. she thought about the 10-year-old girl again. The one who had lost everything and been handed a new shape to pour herself into and had spent 12 years being only the shape and forgetting there was something inside it. She thought about last night in the Great Hall, 200 voices. The moon. She thought about being visible and how it had been the most terrifying thing, and the other thing too, the thing past terror, the thing she still did not have a word for. I used to think that staying invisible was the same as staying safe, she said. I built my whole life on that idea. Now, he said, she looked at the forest, the old trees, the moonlit grounds, the ancient land that had stood here for 300 years before she arrived and would stand here for 300 more. She looked at him. Now I think that being known by the right person is the only safety that actually lasts, she said. He was very still for a moment, then slowly. For the first time since she had seen him, on his throne in the torchlit hall with the blood moon burning outside and the whole of Blackmoor arranged around him like a world that orbited his gravity, the corner of his mouth moved, not the cold near smile from that first night. A real one. It changed his face completely. It made him look his age. It made him look like a man who had been serious for a very long time and had just remembered that seriousness was a choice, not a requirement. Stay, he said, not a command this time. Not the certain finality of the alpha, the unquestionable close of a conversation, just a word. Just a man in the moonlight beside the woman his wolf had found, asking. She looked at him for a long, quiet moment, and she answered, not with words. She let her wolf come fully forward, not shifted, not changed, but present, completely and finally present. And she felt it settle into the space beside his the way two rivers settle when they have been running parallel for a long time, and finally find the place where the bank between them ends. She had been the perfect disguise for 12 years. She had been invisible and careful and untouchable and safe. And standing in the moonlit grounds of Blackmoor Hall with the ancient forest pressing close and the half-moon burning cold and clean above the tree line, and a man beside her who had looked at her face in a crowded hall and known, immediately, that she was not what she appeared to be, she put the disguise down, for good, and the forest breathed, and the moon held. And the grounds of Blackmoor were silver and quiet, and full of the particular peace that comes after something long fought has finally been allowed to be what it always was, a beginning. And that is where we leave them, Elara Voss. The girl who was taken at 10, trained to be invisible, sent to be discarded, who walked into the wrong hall on the right night and put down 12 years of careful survival and chose, for the first time in her life, to be found. Cade of Blackmoor. The alpha who was feared by everyone and reached by no one, who looked at a spy with a stone in her pocket and a lie on her tongue and saw, past all of it, the one thing his wolf had been searching for. They survived the blood moon. They survived Rook. They survived the council and the broken bonding and the 4 words that were supposed to end her. What comes next, the council's assembly, the northern politics, the long work of building trust between two people who were both shaped by loss, that is a different story. And if you want that story, you know exactly what to do. If this series moved you, if you felt Elara in that corridor, if you felt Cade close her fingers over that seal, if you felt the weight of 200 voices saying the moon, then this channel is your home. Subscribe right now. Ring the bell. Never miss and drop a comment below. I want to know, what was the moment that got you? Was it the seal, the study, the moonlit grounds? Was it the 4 words the council sent and what they revealed about the people who sent them? Tell me, write it in the comments. I read every single one and I respond. This story was called The Perfect Disguise until the alpha decided to keep her. And now you know exactly why. Until the next story, stay here, stay with me. And never stop believing that the right person will always see past the disguise. Always.